The world burned before it was reborn. At the dawn of the 22nd century, Earth was a planet teetering on the edge of self-destruction. Climate disasters ravaged entire continents. Economic collapses turned nations into scavengers, warring over dwindling resources. The last Great War, simply known as the Collapse, shattered the old world order, reducing human civilization to isolated strongholds of survivors. Governments fell. Billionaire enclaves became fortresses, and technology, once a symbol of progress, became a tool for domination. But humanity was not so easily extinguished. Amid the ruins, a new kind of leadership emerged, not from the remnants of corrupt elites but from those who had nothing left to lose. These survivors were hardened by the failures of the past and driven by an unwavering belief: if humanity was to survive, it had to do more than rebuild. It had to rise. One such leader was Dr. Elias Carter. Carter had once been an obscure astrophysicist, preaching the necessity of interstellar expansion while world leaders laughed at the idea. Now, with Earth in ruins, no one was laughing anymore. In a hidden bunker beneath the ruins of Geneva, Carter and a coalition of engineers, rogue AI, and ex-military strategists formed Project Exodus. Their goal was audacious: not just to escape Earth but to forge a civilization that would never again be bound by the limits of a single planet. The first step? Space dominance. While scavengers fought over rusted tanks and scraps of food, Carter's team worked in secret, restoring abandoned orbital shipyards and repurposing pre-collapse space stations. They weren't just rebuilding, they were evolving. Advanced AI-assisted fabricators churned out drones, habitats, and the first generation of fusion-powered vessels. The past failures of bureaucracy and greed would not be repeated. This time, humanity would rise under a single guiding principle: survival through expansion. The turning point came when the first colony ship, Pioneer 1, launched from the rebuilt lunar drydock. Powered by a new form of modular nuclear propulsion, it was unlike anything the pre-collapse governments had ever designed. It wasn't just a ship, it was a statement. Humanity would not die on a broken Earth. It would carve its destiny among the stars. But even as the first ships left the cradle of Earth, threats loomed. Rival factions sought to seize control of the fledgling space infrastructure. Remnants of pre-collapse megacorporations, now operating as warlords, saw Carter's movement as a threat to their power. And above all, an even greater danger lurked beyond the solar system, one that humanity had yet to encounter. The first step was taken. The question was, could humanity survive what came next? The launch of Pioneer 1 was supposed to mark the beginning of humanity's ascent to the stars. Instead, it became a rallying cry for war. As the great colony ship burned toward Mars, where the first permanent off-world city was set to be established, the warlords of Earth took notice. These were not petty scavengers fighting over scraps, these were the last remnants of the old order: corporate overlords, rogue military commanders, and technocrats who had hoarded pre-collapse resources. They saw Carter's vision not as salvation but as a direct challenge to their dominion. And they moved to crush it. The siege of the lunar drydock. The first attack came within days of Pioneer 1's departure. The lunar drydock, humanity's single most valuable piece of infrastructure, was targeted by the Black Suns, an elite faction of mercenaries operating under the banner of the former Earth Strategic Command. They were well-equipped, ruthless, and had access to pre-collapse orbital weaponry. Their mission was simple: seize the drydock, cripple Carter's operations, and end humanity's expansion before it truly began. The defenders, a mix of rogue engineers, ex-military pilots, and AI-assisted drones, were outnumbered but not outmatched. While the Black Suns relied on brute force, Carter's people had something far deadlier: innovation. Using a network of autonomous defense satellites, the defenders turned the battlefield into a kill zone. High-speed drone swarms danced through space, overwhelming the enemy's outdated ships. Station-mounted railguns fired magnetically accelerated slugs, tearing through incoming troop carriers. Meanwhile, Carter's AI systems, designed for logistical planning, were repurposed for battle, predicting enemy movements before they even made them. But the Black Suns were relentless. Breaching pods punched through the drydock's outer hull, spilling heavily armed commandos into the station's corridors. Close-quarters combat erupted in the artificial gravity sections, where defenders fought desperately to hold the control centers. Plasma arcs lit up the halls, grenades turned bulkheads into molten slag, and the station trembled from repeated impacts. It was Commander Sienna Ward, a former Martian Marine, who turned the tide. Leading a counteroffensive with a squad of cybernetically enhanced soldiers, she pushed the invaders back, room by room. Her strategy was brutal: funnel the enemy into choke points, cut off their escape, and eliminate them with pinpoint railgun fire. By the time the last Black Sun's operative was neutralized, the battle had cost hundreds of lives. The drydock was damaged but operational. And humanity had won its first war in space. A warning from the stars. As Carter's forces celebrated their hard-fought victory, a transmission arrived, one that changed everything. Deep space probes stationed beyond the Kuiper belt had detected something unnatural. At first, analysts believed it to be a rogue asteroid, but the data didn't match any known celestial body. It was massive, metallic, and moving with a precision that no natural object should possess. It was a ship. An unknown vessel, larger than anything humanity had ever constructed, drifting just outside the solar system. It wasn't just the warlords of Earth that had taken notice of humanity's rise. Something else, something alien, was watching. And it was getting closer. The unknown vessel drifted at the edge of the solar system like a silent sentinel, impossibly large and impossibly alien. It had no transponder, no recognizable propulsion signatures, and no attempts at communication. It simply existed, watching. Dr. Elias Carter stood in the command center of Horizon Station, humanity's first deep space outpost, staring at the hollow projection of the object. His mind raced through possibilities. Was it a derelict? An automated probe? A warship? The answer mattered more than anything, because humanity had just barely won its war for orbit. They weren't ready for an interstellar war. But then again, when had humanity ever been ready for anything? A mission of caution and defiance. With the lunar drydock still undergoing repairs from the Black Sun's attack, Carter's forces had only a handful of operational ships. After a tense debate, a decision was made: humanity would not cower. They would meet this unknown force head-on. Commander Sienna Ward, still recovering from injuries sustained during the siege, volunteered to lead the expedition. She would command Vanguard, one of the newly built long-range reconnaissance vessels, and take a small but elite crew to investigate the anomaly. Armed with humanity's most advanced sensor arrays and a handful of prototype weapon systems, Vanguard was as much a warning as it was a message: "We see you. We will not kneel, *." As the ship burned toward the object, the crew prepared for the worst. If this was an invasion, Vanguard would be humanity's first, and likely last, line of defense. The ghost ship. When Vanguard finally closed the distance, the crew was awestruck. The alien craft, if it could even be called that, was massive, nearly 20 kilometers long, with an intricate latticework of unknown alloys forming its hull. Strange, fractal-like patterns covered its surface, pulsing with faint energy signatures. There was no movement. No transmissions. No signs of life. A cold, uneasy silence filled the Vanguard's bridge. "This isn't a ship," Ward muttered, scanning the data feed. "It's a graveyard." The vessel was ancient. By human estimates, it had been drifting for at least 100,000 years. No life signs, no atmosphere, no obvious propulsion system. And yet, it had power. Something within its core still functioned, emitting signals that pulsed in an erratic, almost organic rhythm. Against Carter's cautious orders, Ward made a decision. They would board it. The descent into the unknown. A small team of explorers, clad in state-of-the-art EVA suits, launched from Vanguard in maneuverable boarding pods. As they neared the colossal structure, the true scale of it became terrifyingly clear. It wasn't just a ship. It was a city, an ancient megastructure, its internal chambers large enough to house entire skyscrapers. As Ward's team breached an exposed section, the interior was nothing like they had expected. There were no control panels, no corridors in the traditional sense. Instead, the walls seemed to shift subtly, as if responding to their presence. Strange, biomechanical structures pulsed faintly, and tendrils of unknown material curled toward them, almost curious. Then, the sensors flared. Something deep within the vessel activated. Power surged through the structure. Light bloomed across the corridors. And for the first time in 100,000 years, something inside it woke up. A message from the past. Back on Vanguard, the ship's AI frantically decrypted a burst of alien transmissions flooding their systems. Carter, watching remotely from Horizon Station, felt his stomach drop as the message finally translated. It wasn't a warning. It was a distress signal. And the last words of its long-dead crew sent a chill through him. Asterisk, they are coming. Asterisk. The alien vessel, dormant for over 100,000 years, was no longer silent. As Ward's team stood in the eerie, biomechanical corridors of the derelict, the ship pulsed with renewed energy. Strange glyphs illuminated the walls, shifting as if they were alive. The ship wasn't just rebooting, it was reacting to them. On the Vanguard, alarms blared. The alien transmission, ancient, broken, desperate, continued repeating in a loop. Asterisk, they are coming. Asterisk. Dr. Elias Carter, watching from Horizon Station, felt a cold weight settle in his chest. What could possibly terrify a species advanced enough to build something like this? And worse, was it already on its way? First contact with the dead. Inside the alien vessel, Ward's team moved cautiously, weapons drawn but useless against the unknown. Their EVA suit scanners struggled to interpret the environment. The walls seemed organic yet metallic, the corridors shifting subtly as if the ship itself was guiding them deeper. Then they found them. The remains of the builders. Encased in exoskeletal suits far more advanced than anything humanity had ever designed, the long-dead aliens lay where they had fallen. Some were slumped over consoles, others collapsed in defensive positions. But what chilled the team the most was the damage. These beings had not died from natural causes. The bodies showed signs of combat, deep lacerations, partially melted armor, and jagged puncture wounds. Some had been torn apart, their limbs fused into the very walls as if the ship had absorbed them. Whatever had attacked them had not simply killed them. It had consumed them. Ward knelt beside one of the remains, its empty eye sockets gazing into eternity. They weren't just fighting an enemy, she murmured. They were running. The eerie silence was shattered by a new signal, one that nearly deafened the team. A piercing, chaotic burst of noise erupted from deep within the ship, causing their helmet visors to flicker. The transmission was unreadable, but it carried an unmistakable tone. Rage. Hunger. Unrelenting purpose. Something had detected them. Something else was waking up. An unseen enemy. Back on the Vanguard, the ship's AI, Echo, fought to stabilize the sensors as the alien distress signal was abruptly overpowered. A second transmission, more aggressive and far less structured, was overriding it. Carter leaned forward as the garbled data slowly resolved into something terrifyingly clear. Not words. Not even a warning. Coordinates. Something, far beyond the Oort cloud, had received the signal. And now, it was coming. Carter knew they had to act. Recall Ward's team, he ordered. Now. But before the order could be executed, Vanguard sensors picked up something else. Movement. Inside the alien vessel. A race against time. Ward's team was already retreating when the corridors shifted around them. The once passive ship now pulsed with an almost organic urgency. Lights flickered. Strange tendrils retracted from their path as if the ship itself was helping them escape. Then the shadows moved. From the far end of the corridor, something detached itself from the darkness. It was vaguely humanoid, twisted, elongated, and wrong. Its body pulsed with an unnatural black sheen, its limbs too sharp, too fluid, as if it were only partially solid. Its face, or what passed for one, was a void, a black hole of shifting angles and impossibilities. It was watching them. Ward didn't hesitate. Run! The team sprinted through the corridors as the thing pursued them, moving in sharp, jagged bursts, one moment still, the next almost upon them. Their weapons were useless. Plasma rounds dissipated before touching it, and kinetic rounds passed through its form as if firing into smoke. It wasn't just hunting them. It was learning them. As they neared the breach point, Ward slammed her fist against her communicator. Vanguard, emergency extraction, *** now, ***. The boarding pods locked onto their signatures, blasting toward the ship at breakneck speed. But just as the team launched themselves through the airlock, the creature reached out. For a fraction of a second, Ward saw its true form. It wasn't a single entity. It was many. Shifting, whispering, flickering between realities like a broken transmission. A virus given shape. A nightmare that had already consumed one civilization and was now turning its attention to humanity. And then, they were free. The pod slammed into Vanguard's docking bay, doors sealing just as the sensors picked up an energy surge from the derelict ship. Carter's voice was in Ward's ear immediately. What the hell happened? Ward, still catching her breath, could only say one thing. We woke it up. The decision that would shape humanity's future. As Vanguard burned hard back toward Horizon Station, the alien ship pulsed with an ominous glow. The entity inside was awake, but for now, it was trapped. But something far worse was on its way. Back on Horizon Station, Carter gathered his advisors. The choice before them was impossible. Option 1 * quarantine the system, bury the discovery, and hope the unknown threat never reaches them. Option 2 * do the unthinkable, begin preparations to abandon the solar system before it was too late. But humanity had never been a species to run. No. They would prepare for war. Because if these things had wiped out one galactic civilization before, then humanity would make damn sure they never did it again. Dr. Elias Carter stood at the center of Horizon Station's war room, staring at the holographic display of the solar system. Symbols flickered across the screen, ship movements, supply routes, and the glowing red marker at the system's edge. The alien derelict was still there, pulsing faintly like a dying star. But it wasn't the immediate concern anymore. The real problem was what had received its signal. The unknown enemy was coming. And no one knew how much time humanity had left. The Solar Defense Initiative. For all their ambition, humanity was woefully underprepared for a war beyond their world. They had barely survived the warlords of Earth. Their fleet consisted of hastily retrofitted cargo haulers, prototype warships, and a handful of orbital platforms equipped with railguns. It wasn't enough. But Carter had long believed that necessity was the mother of invention. Under his command, Project Aegis was formed, a desperate, all-encompassing effort to transform humanity into a spacefaring military power overnight. Every faction, every survivor stronghold, every scattered colony was given one directive: prepare for war. The lunar drydock, still bearing the scars of the Black Sun's attack, became a fortress, churning out warships at a breakneck pace. Horizon Station was expanded into the first true orbital command center. Mars, still under early colonization efforts, was rapidly converted into a military-industrial hub. And in the asteroid belt, Carter pushed forward with his most dangerous plan yet, weaponizing Echo, humanity's first true artificial intelligence. AI had been feared before the collapse, but now it was the only thing that could calculate survival strategies at the speed they needed. Echo's neural frameworks were given full control over drone fleets, targeting systems, and battle simulations. It was a gamble, but one Carter was willing to take. Because time was running out. First signs of the enemy. 2 months after the derelict was discovered, humanity got its first glimpse of the enemy. A deep space probe, stationed far beyond the Kuiper belt, sent back a final transmission before it was destroyed. The data was garbled, but one image burned itself into the minds of all who saw it. A vessel, if it could even be called that. It was not like the derelict, a testament to lost grandeur. No, this was something alive, a shifting mass of shadow and bone, its surface writhing as if it were made of living tissue. The size of a small moon, it moved through the void with unnatural grace. And behind it, were more. Hundreds of them. Not a scouting force. Not an exploratory fleet. An invasion. The probe was gone a second later. Not destroyed in the conventional sense, it was consumed, its signal ending in a sickening distortion of data. The war was no longer theoretical. It was here. The final stand or the first victory? The countdown began. Based on their trajectory, the enemy ships would reach the outer system in weeks. Maybe days. Carter called an emergency war council. "We have two choices," he said, his voice unwavering. "We can wait for them to reach us and fight at Earth's doorstep. Or we can take the fight to them." Ward, now fully recovered from the horrors of the derelict, didn't hesitate. "We strike first." Humanity had never won by playing defense. If they waited, the enemy would reach the heart of the system, and Earth itself could be lost before the first real shots were fired. The plan was set. Project Aegis was no longer about preparation, it was about execution. A fleet would be assembled at Mars, its core formed from the first generation of human warships. They would not fight like the aliens did, with unknowable technology and biological horror. They would fight like humans, with strategy, with numbers, and with the brutal efficiency of machines built for destruction. The battle lines were drawn. For the first time in history, humanity was not fighting each other. They were fighting for their very existence. And if history had proven one thing, it was that humanity was at its most dangerous when it had its back against the wall. The first human war in space had been waged over orbital supremacy. The second was for survival itself. From Horizon Station, Dr. Elias Carter watched the fleet status reports update in real time. The first true warships of humanity's new era, built in the lunar drydocks and armed with bleeding-edge technology, were ready for battle. But no simulation, no military doctrine, no history book could prepare them for this. The enemy fleet had entered the solar system. And it had not come in silence. Every deep space array picked up the same horrifying transmission, an unnatural symphony of distorted echoes, like the whispers of a dying civilization. The shadows of long-extinct species, devoured before they had a chance to resist. The invaders were not here to conquer. They were here to erase. The first strike. The human fleet, designated Task Force Aegis, deployed in high orbit around Mars, using the planet's gravity well to slingshot into an intercept course. The strategy was simple. They could not win a battle of attrition, but they could bleed the enemy before they reached Earth. Commander Sienna Ward, now at the helm of the newly christened H.S. Valiant, led the assault. Humanity's weapons were primitive compared to the unknown horror they faced. Kinetic railguns, nuclear-tipped torpedoes, and experimental plasma arrays, all untested in a real deep space battle. But humans had one advantage: tactics. Ward's fleet moved in coordinated waves, their ships dodging and weaving through the asteroid belt, using debris fields for cover. They struck fast and retreated even faster, baiting the enemy into kill zones where drone squadrons, guided by the AI Echo, turned space into a storm of high-velocity metal. The first engagements were shockingly successful. The enemy was powerful, but it had never fought humans before. It was accustomed to overwhelming its prey, to annihilating civilizations before they could resist. But humanity had been fighting wars for thousands of years. And they had learned one universal truth. A cornered species fights hardest. The horror unleashed. The enemy adapted. Quickly. At first, the invaders' ships reacted with predictable aggression, their movements more organic than mechanical. But after every lost vessel, they began to shift their tactics, mirroring human maneuvers, countering defensive strategies. They were not just strong. They were learning. Then came the worst realization. Destroying the enemy ships was not enough. The wreckage of each vessel, twisted, organic metal hybrids, did not simply float lifeless in space. It regenerated, reshaping itself into something new, something even more twisted. Some fragments merged together, forming grotesque, eldritch shapes, as if the wreckage was being repurposed in real time. And then, the boarding pods were launched. Like living missiles, they embedded themselves in human warships, breaching hulls with sickening efficiency. What emerged was beyond nightmare: twisted, semi-organic entities that adapted to their environments, mimicking their surroundings like viral infections. Entire ships went dark within minutes. Screams echoed across the comms. This was no conventional war. This was a plague. The last stand at Mars. Carter watched in horror as the battle reports streamed in. Casualties were mounting at an unsustainable rate. Even as humanity's weapons inflicted massive damage, it wasn't enough. The enemy was still pushing forward. And they were winning. Ward's fleet had one final gambit. Mars, humanity's first off-world colony, was also home to one of its largest industrial centers. Hidden beneath the surface, deep within the planet's crust, was Project Helios, a last-resort weapon designed in absolute secrecy. A prototype stellar destabilizer. A device capable of triggering an artificial solar flare, one that could be focused into a directed burst of raw stellar energy. It had never been tested. It had never even been completed. But it was their last hope. The plan was simple. Ward's fleet would fall back to Mars, luring the enemy into range. Once the majority of the enemy forces were within the gravitational pull of the planet, the Helios device would fire, unleashing a cataclysmic wave of solar plasma, incinerating anything caught in its wake. There was just one problem. Someone had to activate it manually. A hero's decision. The moment Ward realized what had to be done, she made her decision. With most of Task Force Aegis falling back, Ward and a skeleton crew aboard the H.S. Valiant stayed behind, holding the enemy fleet long enough for the Helios device to reach full charge. The enemy swarmed around them, twisting, shifting, adapting. They sensed the trap. They understood what was happening. And they were afraid. For the first time, the invaders hesitated. Ward smirked. "That's right, you bastards. You finally figured it out." With one final push, the Valiant broke through the enemy lines, flying straight into the heart of the largest ship, a behemoth of blackened flesh and metal. They had no more torpedoes, no more railgun rounds. Nothing left but one last, desperate act of defiance. She turned to her crew. "It's been an honor." And then, she detonated the core. The Valiant erupted in a fireball brighter than a newborn star, tearing through the heart of the enemy fleet. The shockwave disrupted their formations. The Helios device fired. A wave of pure solar fury erupted from Mars, engulfing the battlefield in raw, cosmic fire. The invaders screamed. Their ships buckled, melted, ceased to exist. And then, for the first time since the war began, there was silence. Victory. At a cost ***. The enemy fleet was shattered. What remained of Task Force Aegis regrouped. The survivors of Mars, battered but alive, emerged from their bunkers. Ward was gone. But she had saved them all. As Carter stared at the final battle reports, a single question burned in his mind. Was it over? Then, Echo spoke. "Dr. Carter. I have detected something." He turned sharply. "What?" The AI hesitated. "A new transmission. Not from the enemy. A fresh signal, coming from deep space. Unlike the invaders' transmissions, it was structured. Purposeful. It was a message. From another civilization. Humanity was no longer alone. And the galaxy had just taken notice. In the aftermath of the Great War, humanity was left to rebuild. Mars, though scarred by the battle, had become a symbol of resistance, of how far humanity would go to survive. The rest of the solar system was in disarray, its fleet battered, its colonies exhausted. But they had won. They had stopped the invaders. For now, at least. But victory had come at a steep cost. Commander Sienna Ward, the hero who had sacrificed everything to turn the tide, was gone. Her name was enshrined in every monument, every remembrance. But her absence left a void. And that void would need to be filled by someone willing to take humanity's future into their own hands. Dr. Elias Carter, now fully in charge of humanity's survival efforts, stood before the new Council of Earth. The leaders of Earth's former nations, now unified under a single banner, looked to him for direction. But even they were uncertain about what the future would hold. The victory had shattered the belief that humanity was a small, insignificant species. The galaxy had taken notice. The question was no longer if humanity could survive in this new galaxy, but how they would thrive. Carter knew the truth: humanity had only just begun. The Galactic Empire on the rise. The war against the invaders had proven one thing: that humanity was capable of rising above its weaknesses. No longer would Earth sit quietly in the corner of the galaxy. No longer would humanity be a footnote in the history of the stars. The war had done something no single nation or alliance could achieve: it had united the people of Earth under a common purpose. The Galactic Empire of Earth was born not out of domination or conquest, but from the singular truth that humanity had been forged in fire. For the first time in history, humans would push beyond the cradle of Earth. Their warships, once a mere reflection of desperate need, now represented the might of a unified species. The scattered colonies would be brought into the fold, and new colonies would be established in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. But the greatest challenge now wasn't warfare, it was leadership. Carter stood at the heart of Earth's new capital, the sprawling, gleaming metropolis that symbolized humanity's rebirth. From here, the destiny of an empire would be shaped. But it was not a destiny that could be dictated by one man. The role of the empire would be to create a new order, one based on cooperation, strategy, and exploration. And to do so, they needed new leaders. The Galactic Assembly was formed, where representatives from every world and colony, including the remnants of Earth's fragmented nations, would convene. The challenge was enormous: what kind of system would work for a species that had just learned to cooperate under fire? How could they prevent the mistakes of the past, the very mistakes that nearly led to their extinction? One thing was certain: humanity had no intention of repeating its history. They had learned too much about war, about survival, and about what it meant to hold their own against forces far beyond their understanding. The echoes of the past and the voices of the future. As the first ambassadors were sent to distant star systems, new, disturbing development arose. The message from the unknown civilization, the one that Echo had detected, was no longer a faint whisper. It was growing louder. A new species was out there, one that had been watching humanity's rise with curiosity and concern. These new neighbors were not the invaders. But they were far older, and far more advanced. Their technology made humanity's achievements seem like child's play. And their message was clear. We have been waiting for you. The galaxy was filled with civilizations, some ancient, some young, but all standing in awe of humanity's sudden emergence as a galactic power. The Council of Earth, though united in their resolve, had little understanding of what they were truly facing. There were whispers that the old enemy, the one that had nearly wiped out the derelict's creators, was only one faction of a far greater force. There were rumors of ancient wars, cosmic battles fought in the shadows of time. And in those shadows, humanity would have to learn to navigate, quickly. Carter knew one thing for certain: the war had only been a prelude. What lay ahead was a vast, unknown universe, one filled with opportunity and danger. And humanity, for the first time in history, had the chance to shape its own destiny. The price of empires. But even as the empire grew, the scars of war were still fresh. Humanity had paid dearly for its survival, and those sacrifices were not forgotten. The remnants of the invaders' fleet, now scattered and destroyed, remained in the outer system as a grim reminder. The ruins of ancient civilizations, the derelict ships, had become a symbol of both humanity's triumph and the fragility of life. As the human empire expanded its reach, questions began to arise about the price of that expansion. Could they continue to build upon the ashes of the past without repeating its mistakes? Could they hold their newfound power without losing the humanity that had allowed them to survive in the first place? There were already factions within the empire that disagreed with Carter's vision of peace through strength. Some believed that the galaxy was too dangerous to be handled with diplomacy. Others believed that humanity should be prepared to rule, not simply survive. And far beyond the boundaries of the empire, in the dark corners of the galaxy, there were those who whispered about humanity's rapid rise. Some saw them as a threat. Others as an opportunity. But one thing was certain: humanity had drawn attention. And in the vast reaches of space, where civilizations rose and fell like the tides, attention was a dangerous thing. The question now was not whether humanity could survive. That had already been proven. The question was whether they could thrive, without losing everything they had fought to build. A new chapter. As Carter stood before the Grand Council chamber, looking out over the assembled leaders of the new Galactic Empire of Earth, a final, sobering thought crossed his mind. This was only the beginning. The galaxy, once an infinite and terrifying void, was now humanity's stage. It would test them, challenge them, and force them to confront both the greatest wonders and the darkest shadows the universe had to offer. But as they faced the unknown, they would do so united. And if there was one thing humanity had proven over and over again, it was this. When faced with impossible odds, humanity did not bend. They did not break. They rose. The future of Earth had only just begun.